Well, we are so glad to be back on Grace to Stand. It has been over a month, I believe, George, since
Yes.
we have had an episode. We've been in the middle of the summer, or the summer vacations that you and I have been taking, and classes, and for me, we've recently moved from Greensboro to the Raleigh area, and so that's what's been up for the past month or so, and we've got boxes everywhere. But the summer has been quite busy. What have you been up to over the past month or so, George?
Well, if you ask my congregation, they'd probably say nothing. But be-
Fishing, going to the beach,
yes,
taking trips.
despite the fact that we
Right,
didn't take a family vacation,
right,
but you know the joke with pastors. We only work half a
we're-
day a week, and then
right.
if you're out of the pulpit, you obviously didn't work. And so, um, yeah, this was a unique summer for the Sayors because we usually take summer vacations, and this summer we didn't. As a family, and not for any negative reason or anything. We just life is busy enough, and our kids are teenagers, and there's fun things we can do with them. And so I think we had a number of staycations. I did do a few trips with my kids, but the reason I'm joking about the the I haven't been working for the last month is because I did take a month off from the pulpit. And I started talking to a number of different senior pastors or aware of them, and I was like hearing how they took the month of July off, and I'm like, well, how do you take the month of July off? I mean, we get enough vacation, but so anyway, I said, well, I don't want to take a month off of work, but I could take a month out of the pulpit. I'm blessed to have two great pastors here, Pablo and Taylor, and I'm always looking for opportunities to give them more times in the pulpit. So I alternated them for 4 Sundays, which meant I was out of the pulpit for 5 weeks. And man, it was good to, I was working, and I would just connect with congregants, do some extra visits or lunches that maybe I wouldn't normally do, and plan, the Sunday schools, not Sunday schools, Wednesday night teachings we're doing, the sermon series I'm in, some bigger sort of outreach ideas and concepts I have for the church. And so that was good. Yeah, that's what I've been doing the last month. It has been a very eventful summer on a number of for a number of reasons, and we can get into some of those dynamics. But what have you been doing the last month with the move, particularly? So you said you moved to Raleigh, and so
Right.
I noticed you looked very professional today, and I'm very more like kind of summer George, the light, short sleeve shirt, and you're wearing a tie with a button down dress
Yes,
shirt. So
looking sharp. Well, yes, I was at the Capitol today. They're having a number of votes here in the North Carolina State House of Representatives, and then the state Senate on some veto overrides. So there've been a number of things like that going on here, and so it's there's just a whole bunch of folks at the Capitol, protesters on both sides of the issues, and
wow.
the media, and the staff, and of course elected officials. So I've been here today, but over the past month, there's really not been a whole lot going on around here because they're working on the budget, which has been good for me because we decided to move, and we've been flirting with this idea for a while, but we decided to move over to Raleigh because it's much closer to the capital. Well, that's where the capital is, and so it reduces my commute to the capital by quite a bit. And so the time that I'm able to use in ministry here at the state capitol is much more strategic, and I can focus that attention much better without having to spend 3 hours of my day in the car. And then we earlier in July we were in Orlando for a week. I was taking a doctor of ministry class down at RTS, and it
Ah,
is, I mean, North Carolina is hot. Orlando, let me tell you something, and this is coming from a guy who's from California and also lived 4 years of his life in Arizona. I mean, it's hot in Florida. It was brutal. So, but we had a good time. We had a good time there. But it's just been, and then we were of course in Memphis at General Assembly. So there's been a lot of traveling. We were on a church retreat for over in Tennessee for about 3 days. So just a lot of in and out, and I think that's par for the course for a lot of people during the summer. And then we are about to start school, and I don't know, maybe your kids have started, George. Have they started back to school yet, or just about
Oh,
to? Yeah,
oh, it's coming. I think
yeah,
tomorrow might be the day, but oh my goodness.
yeah.
And that, Darren, that really like leads us to the concept or the topic we want to talk
All
about
right.
today was just seasons. And so I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
read
Mm-hmm.
from Ecclesiastes 3 as we jump into that kind of conversation. But Ecclesiastes 3 well. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And if I had a singing voice, I may have sung it for you. But seasons, a time, and I think that's what I've been really just aware of this summer. And you mentioned the kids in school, and that plays into it. But two kind of pervading themes have pervaded my summer thoughts. One is the sovereignty of God and really the sovereign grace of God. That could be its own episode. But just, my summer kicked off with that near fatal accident where we all walked away as fine. And really it kind of ended with, on the end of July, with the ticket for reckless driving regarding that being completely just dropped. And it's kind of interesting how my summer was bracketed by this accident, Memorial Day, before June, and then the end of July with the ticket. And so, I think I said I got a reckless driving charge, driving too fast for road conditions, despite, there was no witnesses to that. And there's no, but the evidence is, well, you skidded off the road, your trailer hydroplane, you see, you obviously were driving too fast for the road conditions. And that kind of hung over me because you look that up in Virginia, and reckless driving is a serious offense, and no lawyer gave me any kind of confidence that I'd get out of it. And even the lawyer that I hired, and I was kind of at one point wondering why I hired him, but man, he I don't know what he did or whatever. I didn't go to court. He said he preferred I didn't, but they was dropped because no witnesses were there, and he had only said I would get it reduced from a misdemeanor to something else. It wasn't even just that it was reduced; it was just dropped. And so that was, and just God's hand through that whole thing. And just got to keep giving praise to God. So wanted to mention
Right.
that, and then just talk about some other recognitions. But what any thoughts you had as we continue to
Yeah, yeah. I
converse?
mean, it's so I think of the start of the school year almost like New Year's, right? I mean, and
Yes.
I think we did an episode on this back in around January, just starting off the new year, and it's almost psychologically like that in many respects. Even, for those of us who've been out of school for a long time, and maybe even have kids who are well out of school, there's just something embedded in the rhythm of our culture that right around Labor Day is the time of some newness, of shifting into a new season, shifting into the fall, shifting into a new rhythm of life. And so that Ecclesiastes 3 passage you read speaks to that on some degree. I mean, we go through different rhythms of life, different seasons, and sometimes that can be challenging. I mean, what we're doing with our life it does not always maintain this 365-day consistency. There's some ebb and flow to it, different seasons of life, and that can be really joyful. I mean, that can be a wonderful thing. We can look forward to the next thing, but it also presents to us many challenges. And I think that what you see in the passage like Ecclesiastes 3, which is how we can interpret the different changing scenes of life, the different seasons of life, is that whether we are in the time to be born or a time to die or a time to weep or a time to laugh or whatever the case may be, God is right there in the middle of all of that. I mean,
Yeah.
he's never there's never a time for God to be around and a time for God to be on vacation, right?
Oh,
I mean,
that's so good.
he is always and in every way right there in the midst of the times and the changing scenes of life. And I think that's something that we as Christians can have great confidence in, and it helps us really to uh, even remember our own limitations with regard to how how to approach the times to seek and the times to lose. I mean, our
Mm.
inability to perfect to as just as the passage says, as you kind of marinate in that passage, our own limitations there. I mean, from our perspective, life can be sort of this rat race and a circular sense of history that things don't really always make sense. But what we see from God's perspective, and especially when you move down to verse 11, you keep sort of reading this passage. Verse 11 says He's made
Mm.
everything beautiful in its time, right?
Ah, yes,
So in its
yes.
time, I mean, God has made everything beautiful, and there's a beauty, and sometimes that beauty is elusive and it's very difficult to see, and sometimes very obvious and deeply experienced. Uh, but in the changing scenes of life, and as we consider moving into this back to school season, there is that element that we need to always consider right there that God has made everything beautiful in its time, and He is in the midst of all those changing seasons.
Wow, man, that's so good. And I think I think that's what I would say too. Why I brought up, I wanted to update everybody on the concluding of the accident. But for me, that season was bracketed by my summer was bracketed by that. And honestly, I think I really went into the summer after the accident with just a great appreciation to God for my kids. And that kicked off this whole season for me as we talk seasons of realizing how they're not kids anymore. They're not kids anymore. And the idea, like, so school is starting. You've referenced that a few times. Like my youngest is going into middle school, so there's a change of season for him. There's a different pattern and ebb to the school day now, and different expectations. And my middle child is going into high school, which is completely new for her. And this summer we've been aware of that. Like I have my two older kids working on standardized testing um, during the summer and just trying to get them into that kind of a pattern. And my oldest, I took on a trip since, as I said earlier, we didn't do a family vacation. So we did a college trip up to around the Pittsburgh area of Pennsylvania to Grove City College and Geneva College. Geneva being a Presbyterian college, Grove City has Presbyterian roots. Both Christian colleges that have a good reputation, and they're both known for engineering. And I wanted to check them out, being an engineer, in my own studies and by career at one point, just to see is it a legit engineering program. And we were both really encouraged by their engineering program. But what I learned from this trip to speak about seasons is my son is like, I have glimpses of the fact that he's a man. He's going into his junior year, and it wasn't like I was with a kid that I had to do things for. It was more like maybe a mentorship. I'm still his dad, of course, but it was like I was on a road trip with a friend. We went camping, we went kayaking, we went mountain biking, but like to see his mind work, questions he asked at these colleges, the way he handled the tours, the way he was processing it was bittersweet for me because it made me realize, oh my goodness, like they are going to be out of the house soon and time has flown. Like I still feel like I'm new in North Carolina, and yet he's gone from elementary school to, I'm looking at him graduating high school soon. And it's bittersweet. And I'm looking at my youngest and saying, I wish you were still a little kid, and my daughter, I definitely wish I could have frozen in time. And so all these thoughts and emotions about my kids growing up as we enter this school year. Yeah, yeah. Do you have any of those experiences, Darren, where you
Oh,
just like you wake up and you're like, what happened? Where did my kids go?
mhm.
I know you have some really young ones, but you also have some older ones. And
Yeah,
so,
the days are long and the years are short. They go by fast. And I mean, my oldest is turning 17 tomorrow,
oof.
and I was thinking about it last night because I was, I was kind of cradling our 3-year-old daughter in our arms, and in my arms as she was, just wrestling with trying to go to sleep and go to bed, and she's dressed in this, princess outfit, and it's the same thing my oldest would have worn when she was
Wow.
3. And it's just, yeah, it's interesting to have a young woman in the house who's approaching adulthood and will not be under our roof that much longer. Um, Moving into just a different phase of life, that interdependence stage, versus having a 3-year-old who likes to wear a crown and wave a wand and wear plastic princess shoes into the grocery store.
I
I mean
love
that,
that.
and it's exactly what my 17-year-old used my tomorrow 17-year-old would do. So, um, yeah, I think that what we ought to do in those seasons. I mean, we're talking about our children, but golly, so what's happened in that amount of time? I've aged too, right? You've aged. We've all aged. I mean, there are parts of my body I didn't
Thanks.
know even existed. I mean, it's it, we feel it, we experience it, and we'll experience it more. Just the way our bodies and our circumstances and life situations change, and that's why I'm so glad that by the way, I was talking about this Ecclesiastes passage a little bit more than George was at the beginning, but it was his idea to come up with it, kind of orient our episode around it this time, because it just so speaks to these different seasons that we find ourselves in, not just with the beginning of the school year, but with the changing ages of our children and our own lives. And I think what we can gather from that, as you read that famous, so many people know that passage, a time for this and a time for that, from that song that the Byrds sang back in the '60s. And we can all sing it. But what do we gather from that? What do we ought to do in light of that? How ought we approach it? I mean, we ought to approach it, the way that Solomon presents to us in verse 12, that I perceive that there's nothing better for them to do than to be joyful and do good as long as they live.
Ah,
Right? And that everyone should eat, drink, and take pleasure in all his toil, for this is God's gift to man.
mm,
Where, there are what you can do with your children when they are 3 is great. And then they're out of that season. And then they become young men or young women like our oldest children are, and you're doing a college visit and you're pinching yourself because you remember the college visit that your parents took you on, that
yes, I
in many
did.
respects don't it, I mean, it's so vivid that it's like, that wasn't that long ago, was it? I mean, it was a while, but it
Wow.
wasn't that long ago. And you remember that. And we have, and there's these seasons are just sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, brutally difficult. However, the work that we have to do, the ordinary mundane tasks that we have before us in these uh, different epochs of time, are are times to seek the joy of the Lord, to remember that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and He appoints the perfect time for things to come about. I mean, it was in the fullness of time that Jesus came, right? That was
Ah,
the time, and He appoints a time for everything, and so one of my regrets that I still battle with, I mean, I still struggle with this, is that is this kind of idea of, man, I wish if we could just get to this next stage, if we could just get to that next, season, or this next, or just a year from now, or what, and instead of really enjoying the moment that God in His providence has placed me, and and taking my desires and bringing them into conformity with the providential circumstances that I find myself in this particular time. When that can happen, then there's a joy that can emanate from the heart that is something that I think is counterintuitive in a culture where we seek to just please our nerve endings with each experience, and we have the FOMO, kind of fear of missing out, issue that, that hits all of us.
Wow. Wow, you said a lot of good things there, a lot of good perspective. I was just in a conversation with a few people before this call,
Mm-hmm.
and it just impressed upon, we were talking about a lot of these very same things because of the school year starting and all that, and
Mm-hmm.
it really impressed upon me how three people in three different phases or seasons of life can view something like the start of the school year in three completely different ways. And so what I mean by that is, like, for us, Susan and I we've really reminisced about the fact that summer has been nice. We have three teenagers, and I guess my youngest is a teenager. Is he going to be 13? He's going to be 13, but he's like a teenager. So three teenagers, and they're just really easy this summer, and they their lives are, they've been easy to kind of get around, and even in some cases, my son Adam was picked up by a friend, and that's easy too. And so summer was good. It was stress free on us. There wasn't a lot of outside demands for our kids, which made life easier for us. And as the school year started, and as you were saying, did school start? Like the last 3 weeks, because my kids are all on cross country teams and they've all been practicing, and there's two different teams involved, and then there's different meetings, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is what school is again. It's managing three people's schedules that are not up to us. And just like saying, but then to hear this perspective of this other person who, for him, summer, he's got very young children, very young, baby and a toddler almost. Summer is an unstructured time that was very stressful for them. And they were looking forward to, even though there's stress of a school year, having the pattern and routine of, there has to be a wake up time, a dress time, a time to get the kids ready for school, to kind of take them to school, a period where they're at school or whatever it is, daycare, whatever it is, a time. And it's like, so he was looking forward to that because summer was too difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third person I'm talking to has kids in I guess starting middle school or maybe a little younger, all the way up to kids in college. And she wanted her kids to get to college. It's like, because having them home for the summer, as joyful as that was, when you have a number of kids in the house, there are routines that are upset. And it brought joy to my heart, because as we were discussing it, it was like, it's exactly what you said, Darin. How do we, verse 12, I perceive that there's nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. In other words, enjoy the season. As much as we might want to wish this season were over, like, I would never want to be back when I have toddlers and babies. I never want to go back there. And yet there are things I wish I relished and cherished.
Mm-hmm.
And there are moments when I look at my daughter and I wish she were a toddler again, because
Mm-hmm.
she's a beautiful woman right now. And I miss when she was a cute little child. And so seasons, man, absolutely. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. I mean, I do, because I mean, you have three kids and I have four, but yeah, different seasons of life, and I mean, I'm thankful that Um, the bedtime routine for my 17-year-old is, and my 12-year-old is far easier than it is for my 3-year-old, right? And
Right.
it's just far, and I'm so looking forward but then I also really enjoy the bedtime routine, when I'm able to step back
Mm.
and think about it, and I'll miss it. And I missed that time of being able to rock my younger ones and just kind of, hug them, and they think that daddy hung the moon, and when they get to be teenagers, they don't, they start to not think that way as much. So I mean, it's yeah, I think, our calling in the Christian life is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever, right?
Ah,
And He has given us all good gifts to enjoy. I mean, He's given us um, these tangible things, these material items and goods that we have, and these experiences uh, that we go through in life, and they're here and they're gone, right? They're not eternal experiences. It's not eternal bliss. They all lived happily ever after, because although God does not change, we do, and we move through time in this regard. So I think, just remembering to stop, and it's very easy to complain and let the wearisome aspects of whichever time in our life that we're going through overwhelm us, rather than just you know seeking ways to enjoy God and enjoy the gifts that He gives us as pointers to God in that season of life. I mean, there are so many people, in people in the state of singleness, right? And maybe they really want to be married, and that just hasn't come to pass yet, or it hasn't come to pass in the time that they wanted to. And that's very hard. I mean, it's hard. It's. I mean, I get it. I was there. I've been there. I totally understand that. But at the same time, um, there are privileges, opportunities, things you can experience in life during a period of singleness that you don't have that at other stages of life. So enjoy it, right? Enjoy
wow,
that.
yeah.
Seek the Lord. There when you're sleep deprived with a bunch of uh, young children in the household, and everything's always a mess, and it's like you're playing whack-a-mole, just trying to, you pick up one mess and then the next mess happens right behind you that you just cleaned. It's just all the time, and you're just exhausted. That season's going to be gone, so enjoy those little children, and the work that you're in. It may not be the you may not be in your dream job right now, but how can you enjoy the Lord and give thanks to Him in what's going on right now? And then, as you continue to read in the passage, it says, that in verse 14 says, "I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before Him." Right. So there's a I think the tasks that we see in the different seasons of life, tasks that we have as a Christian, are to live joyfully and to fear Him. In other words, to glorify and enjoy Him in the time and in the circumstances that we have.
Nice. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And what a beauty! It really, God is so wise. I mean, we know that, but like when
Mhm.
you see it, even back to that conversation I had with these individuals, there, as you were talking, it was reminding me there was a single person there, and
Right.
this person was reflecting on some of what you, and then there were people with adult kids there, and some of us, because I'm just, it's a sweet period in our home right now at our kids' ages. It just is, and this person was saying, well, when they turn 18, there's a different thing because they're adults, but you're still responsible for them because they're in your house, until they, and
Yeah.
yeah, how do we, you said it, the FOMO and the trying to get to the next thing. And as a type A person who used to work in corporate America, and I can often be driven about that. Everything is about achieving a goal and then what's next. And so much of the good life is pictured as sitting under your palm tree. It's like,
Right.
and that's what, back to verses 12 and 13. I perceive there's nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his
Mm-hmm.
toil. This is God's gift to man. And so you have there this, it's not a juxtaposition
Mm-hmm.
but like, it's like there's toil and enjoy it. There's what we have to do, the day in and day out, what we have to do. I love how you brought in Westminster on that, even like, glorifying God and enjoying him forever in the daily, whatever you do, whether you do all to the glory of God.
Right.
Amen. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I hope that's some good fodder for us, and that passage is just a great one to kind of lean into as we enter into the new school year and whatever is before us. Some of our listeners are entering into very difficult seasons, and some of us are coming out of them, and things are really, you're coming up for a breath of fresh air, and maybe it's your time to mourn, or maybe it's your time to joy and to take joy. And I think I want to just encourage those who are listening to kind of meditate upon that Ecclesiastes 3 passage, particularly remembering that God brings about the circumstances of life and does things in his own time and in his own ways, and it's always ultimately working for our well-being. I mean, you think of like, why did Jesus wait to raise Lazarus as long as he did? I mean, it says that he stinks. He was already he was dead, and he had been dead for a long enough time to where there was a stench that was coming from him. Why didn't he handle that situation differently? I mean, for his own glory, right? There's a display of his glory there. There's a display of of dependence upon Christ that the people had, that they might not have had uh, to exhibited otherwise. So that's what in all the seasons of life, although they differ, the message is still the same. Keep looking to Jesus, keep leaning into Jesus, keep enjoying Jesus, um, in when the circumstances are as good as they could possibly be, or as miserable as they could possibly be, because he does not change, and he is for us, and he will never leave us or forsake us. We're not under condemnation. Nothing can separate us from his love. And if that's the case, we can find joy in the midst of all of the seasons of life um, without idolizing what we have or what we experience, or despairing entirely as a result of our failure to have what we desire. So I hope that's a good takeaway for us.
That's grace to stand on,
That's
Darin.
grace to stand on. So that's our aim here. So we're really appreciative that you listen. We're so glad to be back after a month off, and we'll have a lot more to report and more to talk about next time on our next episode of Grace to Stand. So we hope you'll tune in then.